Cuyahoga County Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, May 14th is now called to order. Andrea, would you please call the roll?
Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 3:14 p.m. As a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll, Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Present.
Mr. Sweeney.
Present.
Mr. Byrne. Mr. Byrne is absent. Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Schron. Mr. Schron is absent. Ms. Conwell.
Present.
Ms. Turner.
Present.
Ms. Stevens.
Present.
Ms. Simon.
Here.
Council President Jones.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Andrea. Has anyone signed in for public comment?
No public comment has been received.
All right. So at this time, we do have a proposed substitute.
I'll read it into the record first.
All right.
Resolution 2024-0129, making an award on requisition 12232 and authorizing a lease agreement bearing contract with Cleveland Superior LLC for a lease of space located at 1801 Superior Avenue, Cleveland, Ohio, for the period July 1st, 2024 through June 3rd, 2041, in the amount not to exceed $91 million, which includes but is not limited to rent, initial capital expenditures, management fees, utilities, operating expenses, and a general contingency amount.
All right.
Now we introduce the proposed substitute.
I'll make a motion to accept the proposed substitute.
To accept, you're introducing the proposed substitute, and Director Maniloff will present the item.
So we have to vote on the, we had a
First,
and a second.
we hear it. We hear the proposed substitute.
Okay, I can explain it very well. So as will be discussed by Mr. Pilati and others, later a definitive decision was made by the Board of Elections not to conduct early voting for the November election at 1801 Superior, but rather to hold early elections for the November election at Hughes. As a result, the lease has been changed surgically to take out all of the early voting possibilities that we had included previously in the lease. As a result, the substitute before you changes the term from July 1, 2024, which contemplated early voting for the November election at 1801, to what is now contemplated in the lease, which is the rent commencement on or about January 31st, 2025, and then running for 17 years thereafter. So that's the reason for the substitute, is that there's no longer going to be 100.00% chance that it is going to be held at Hughes and not 1801. So we made that surgical change, thus causing the need for this substitute. That would be my explanation.
Okay, so thank you for that. So now
Yes,
we know and the community knows that early voting will take place at the current Board of Elections
Correct.
location. There will be no change for this November election. Okay, all right, well, with that, thank you, Director Maniloff.
Question
And
on
we'll,
the substitute.
any questions? Yes, Councilman Miller.
So, Mr. President, to Director Maniloff, I heard some discussion that this change in direction and delay in the start date might allow for some cost savings, but the language does not seem to reflect that. It's still the same 91 million. So can you shed any light on that?
We can, Brian, if you would like to address that, and/or Director Dever, I can set the table for that. The reasoning behind that is that we are, out of an abundance of caution, we are staying with the $91 million because there are a lot of moving parts. There is a scenario under which there will be material savings by not having early voting at the 1801 Superior location. But I guess for further information, I guess I would defer to Deborah and Brian.
Hello, Ryan Jeffers, CBRE.
So the reasoning there, Councilman Miller, is that, as I understand it, the legislation memo that you just heard is a not-to-exceed number. There is a lot of flexibility in the contract that has been negotiated at the discretion of the county, where we can move in other groups to the upper floors of the building after the BOE, and we are able to define the timeline. We are able to pull that timeline up to be sooner. We're able to push that timeline back up to a certain point. The 91 million is a not-to-exceed number. We do project a savings in reality based upon what we know for the lease expirations of groups that would be occupying the upper floors. We can talk about that today. We are projecting a savings, but as it's written, the county has discretion to pull up some of those groups in earlier if they chose to, so the not-to-exceed number remains the same.
So, Mr. President, to Mr. Jeffers, can you quantify to some degree what the projection on the savings that's possibly achievable would be?
We believe that the savings are likely to be in the range of 1.02 million overall, based upon our best projections of the future occupancy of those groups, knowing their leases and the timeline of those at other locations. But the county has flexibility.
Question. Councilwoman Conwell.
Yes, through the chair to Law Director, Dever, whoever can answer. In terms of, I see the proposed substitute was to push the term back to 1/31/2025. My thing is, I'm feeling comfortable that the November elections will not be impacted in any way. We won't mess up on that era. But why would we push the date back so close to primary elections? Why wouldn't we just continue the move and let them have that flexibility for that many months till we get to March?
So you're talking about why not move in during the fall, even if the early vote was not there, just to clarify your question?
Whatever processes that we possibly,
Absolutely understood. So what we had discussed the last time that we were here in front of you was that the county had that flexibility and that opportunity to potentially hold the early vote at 1801 Superior this fall. As you heard, the Board of Elections has made the decision not to pursue that, but that was the only area that would have been prepared in the fall under that agreement. It was something that was being accelerated for that purpose. And now that that is not happening, the timeline to allow the landlord and the contractor proper time to build and construct the space and get the property ready puts us into Q1 of '25.
so there will, even though there won't be a specific through the chair, any move going on, there will be work that will be going on during the process.
Absolutely. Upon approval, there's design and engineering and permitting and construction. There's an awful lot that happens in the coming months.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, Michael Dever with Department of Public Works, thanks for having us. And Director Perlotti is about to come up and give a presentation also, so maybe you'll be able to shed more light on that also.
All right. Continue.
Thanks, and as I just said, that we've asked, actually, I think the board has been requesting to hear from Director Perlotti, so we'd like him to come up and hopefully answer any of your questions today. Also, we had forwarded back to you the list of questions that came from the council yesterday, and that packet should be in front of you. So thank you.
Council did receive it.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tony Perlotti, Director with the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. And so I want to just briefly talk about this November's early vote. Starting off with, yes, we're not going to do the early vote at 1801 Superior. It's going to be at the Hughes Building. And at the Board of Elections meeting on May 7th, the board members determined that November 5th will maintain where it is at the Hughes. And this is with guidance received from the Secretary of State's office. And so threats against election officials, increased concerns of attempts to interfere with election administration across the country continues to grow each month, if not on a weekly basis, as we approach this upcoming election. So the Secretary of State understands what the limitations are at the current location, but they know that we at the Board of Elections are also aware of these limitations. We can now proactively work to minimize these. We have a proven track record of conducting elections at the Hughes Building, and where we do not yet have a track record at 1801 Superior, and we don't know what we don't know at that location. So while the Secretary of State thinks that this is a great opportunity on a go-forward basis for the Board of Elections to be at 1801 Superior, the board members who report to the Secretary of State take that guidance very seriously and made that determination what they believed early on, so the rest of this process can go forward with 1801, and for us to just singly focus on the Hughes Building for the upcoming November 5th election. Now, we've said at these committee meetings that the Board of Elections with Public Works has been working two paths as we prepare for the upcoming November election, and so this is where we are regarding the path for the Hughes Building. We have been working with our neighbors, like we always do, on trying to secure parking, and as of now, we have 150 non-ADA parking spots committed from our neighbors. Our back parking lot will have about 30 ADA/curbside parking spaces in our lot. And we continue to talk with other neighbors, and mid-June, they told us they'd be able to answer back, and we should about double the number of non-ADA parking spots to get close to 300, which would be, I think, sufficient to conduct the election. Also, what we're going to be doing is similar to what we did in March of 2020. We're going to erect a tent in the back parking lot at the Board of Elections. So typically in a presidential election, we put a tent from the front steps down to the corner of 30th and Euclid. Then we put another tent going from 30th and Euclid down to the exit apron of our parking lot. We'll continue to do that. But then in our parking lot against the building, so basically from that exit driveway to the building, we'll have a large tent put up. And we did that in March 2020 in the COVID election. What that gets us is about 400 linear feet of voter line underneath that tent. And to kind of give perspective to that, 400 linear feet is basically on 30th, from our property line down to the corner of Chester and 30th. So we're able to take all that sidewalk line, get it onto our property under cover of a tent, and also falls within 100 feet of the door to the polling location, which is relevant in that that's the no campaign zone. So while voters come to the line, they're able to engage with campaigners, but once they get in the line, then campaigners are off limits. And so it's just easier for the sheriff's office to manage that and keep everyone safe, with basically most of the voters being on Board of Elections property. With the way that we do ballot on demand now, as we have for the last year, instead of pick and pull ballots off a wall, that speeds up that process. So I think these changes help us to move people through the line, help with parking turnover. I have good confidence that that 150 will definitely grow to more spots, and then it's good for the ADA curbside voting process. So everyone knows, this will be my fifth presidential election as an employee at the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections, my second as director. 7 of the 9 current managers we have were on my management team in 2020 for that presidential, and they're still here. So we have a lot of institutional knowledge. We've lived through a lot of curveballs and a lot of craziness over the years, and we will do whatever it takes to succeed at that location. So regarding the November early vote, any questions?
Well, it might not be for the early vote, but through the chair to Director Paralotti, has anyone had a conversation with you? Will BOE be brought in over the next few months during the renovations for better communications for how it's set up? So as they're doing whatever they need to do, you come with the knowledge of how it should be, you know, or what exactly you need it to look like.
So, through the chair, so as far as what the setup will be at the Board of Elections, so already started communications with Public Works, will work with us to get the location set up. They are engaging an architecture firm to help us with best space management of the property. And again, a lot of the things that we utilized in March of 2020, some of what we utilized in November of 2020 during those COVID elections, we're going to bring some of that back with modifications. So we definitely, Board of Elections is going to have input, and I think actually will be the driver of what we need to get this done, to be successful. And then we will, as we get closer to the election, we will communicate with the voters, where the parking is, how you access the line, and all those types of things for a successful election, early in-person experience. So I do have confidence. I will say that you may see me again one other time asking for an additional appropriation for some of these things that we need to do. But it's, you know, as we went into this budget cycle, not knowing exactly where the early vote was going to be and what we needed, some of the tents and the additional parking lots, those are things that I think are necessary and we need to spend money on to make this a success.
A follow-up through the chair to Director Paralotti. Is the March or the date 1/31/2025, will that allow you enough time for the March primary? And I don't know where that falls.
Sure. Through the chair. So the it's in March is only in the presidential year, so in 2025, it'll be a May primary election. I believe it's May 6th. Because Cuyahoga County, of the 59 communities, 53 are chartered, so not everyone participates in that May election, definitely the statutory cities. When you look to history, about 25 to 30% of the precincts in Cuyahoga County usually participate in that election. So it's not countywide, which just helps in administering. And as Ryan had said, there's a lot of work to be done. So as long as things continue on this path and the Board of Elections at some point in January is able to walk into a location that has the early vote center that is set up, and a lot of our staff doesn't need to be 100%, but all the key critical components to run that election, if we can start to make those moves in January, throughout February, I think we will have success in that May election with that early vote starting in April. I think we will probably be in place a good month before that starts, and we'll be able to properly educate voters on where to go and have our processes in place.
But it won't just be for early vote, it'll be a total move, correct?
Correct. The goal is that those individuals, when they need to come file their petitions, they would do that at the new location.
Thank you.
Councilman Miller?
So, Mr. President, Director, do we know the exact dates for this year's early vote, and if yes, what are they?
October 8th is the opening of the early vote, is also the first day that we're able to mail out vote-by-mail ballots.
And how far does it go? Does it go to the Sunday before Election Day or the Monday before Election Day? What's the cutoff date?
The early vote hours change from election type. So in a presidential general election are the most hours of early voting. So it starts on that Tuesday the 8th. It's weekdays and then the 2 weekends prior to Election Day, that Saturday and Sunday for those 2 weekends prior, there is weekend voting. At 5 o'clock on the Sunday before the election, that's when early in-person voting ends. Last year, House Bill 458 removed early voting on the Monday prior to Election Day.
And how many early voters can you handle in a day?
So, one, whoever shows up, as long as they're there by the time we close, we vote them. So nobody, as long as they're in line at that time, we will continue to stay open past whatever the closing hour is to vote them. We, in our current location, not with every computer terminal up, we've been able to process about 400 voters per hour. So we will, as long as we can recruit the additional temporary employees, we'll have more check-in stations, so that throughput should increase for that. And so overall, we're looking 50 to 55,000 voters over the course of that month. I'm not sure what that math is, but that's probably over, well, over 1,000 a day at the start, probably building up to around 3,000 towards the end.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you.
So I would just like to leave with, I want to thank you for considering this lease. The Board of Elections is excited for this opportunity. The board members, myself, Deputy Director Gallagher, would like to see this happen if the body finds this to be correct, but it's something that's going to be great for the voters on a go-forward basis. So again, thank you for this consideration, and look forward to hopefully seeing this pass.
Mr. President, can I?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I didn't know you were leaving the dais. I thought it was just about early vote. Since you're leaving, I'll just ask my question.
Okay.
When this started, the board sent us a letter saying, we'd like to tighten up a little bit more through the chair. And then a letter came and said, we're cool because we talked to the administration and everything's all right. My only concern is it's not in the legislation. I talked to Trevor earlier, and I didn't get the amendment to all my colleagues, but I just want you to be very aware, there's no language that says when you, that guarantees that you're going to be consolidated in this spot. There's hope, there's wishes, there's commitments, but if it passes today out of council, we'll have 2 more weeks, and I'm going to talk with my colleagues just to see if we can get some more certainty in the legislation that accomplishes what your goals, when you briefed me, that you would like a single unified campus in a time frame that is acceptable to the Cuyahoga County and through Mike's efforts here. So because things could change, right? Administration, somebody can do this, somebody can do this, and if it's not crystal clear in the legislation, and I'd like to push it as far as we can. If we can't get a shall or a must, I'd like to have something reflective that this is our hopes and wishes, but it's in the legislation. So I just wanted to share that with you and talk to my colleagues about this, and if it passes out tonight, I'll be talking about that in the future. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further comments, questions? Okay. Now, we've already entertained a motion to accept the proposed substitute and a second. Again, is there any further discussion on the proposed substitute?
Council President, we have not done the motion to accept the proposed substitute yet.
I'll make a motion to accept the proposed substitute.
Second.
All right. Oh, but again, any further discussion?
Not on the substitute, but the substance of this, but.
All right, all
Okay.
right. All those in favor of accepting the proposed substitute, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, ayes
Council
have it.
President, just for clarification, the motion to accept was Councilmember Sweeney, who seconded, please?
That's correct. I made the motion. It was seconded by Councilman Sweeney.
Thank you.
And at this time, Director Deborah, if you would have any further presentations on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, pretty much we forwarded a response to the questions posed by council and questions that had arisen at the previous meetings also. They're in the packets that were presented, and we stand here before you to answer any other further questions or comments you may have.
Again, if there are any questions at this time from council?
Yes, Council President?
Yes.
So I have questions on the questions, answers to the questions we asked, and particularly with regard to the repairs for which the county would be responsible. It looks like pursuant to this new lease that we are only responsible for repairing interior doors within the premises?
Not quite. The question that was asked was specific, Councilwoman,
Oh.
to repairing broken windows and doors, so we answered that.
What are we because when I'm looking at the answers, it looks like the landlord has the majority of repairs. Tell us what the county's looking to, in addition to, well, why are we going to have to pay for interior door repairs? That would be the first question.
So the way that the responsibility is separated, think about it as building versus premises. What happens within the four walls of the BOE are subject to the use of the people who are in the BOE. So as people open and close doors quickly or lightly, as people use the space, the repairs of that space are the responsibility of the BOE. That's a pretty typical.
Ryan, are we, I understand that. So
Yeah.
there's nothing now inherently wrong with the doors. Are the doors in? Is this build out? What's anticipated with, are these doors pre-existing? Are we building out the doors?
The space is being renovated and delivered for that projected January 31st, 2025
So there'll be
date.
new doors.
There are going to be new doors.
New
There are
doors.
some areas where, there's a couple of areas where there are pre-existing steel and glass doors that are in good shape and would stay. Landlord has to deliver their renovations in good working order on all fronts.
So ultimately, we're going to be looking at the wear and tear on the premises in our space.
And the landlord maintains
Pam.
the building.
Okay, that's it
Yes.
for now.
All right, if there are
Have
no,
we, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
how much of an have we done? And I'm sorry if this has been answered. I know we did environmental studies, we've been looking at the building. I know there's been previous concerns about the condition of this building. How much of our due diligence are you comfortable with it?
Very comfortable. We've had consultants, architectural, engineering, and construction, not to mention individuals within Public Works crawling all over the building for months now.
Who was doing that? I'm kidding. Mike Dever was crawling.
Just like
Not myself.
Okay.
No, but our building trades, our electricians primarily have been going through the building, and other people within our trades group. Also, we've had consultants involved in review of the building. That's why we feel very comfortable with this building and the condition of the building.
Mr. Dever, if you could speak directly into the microphone, please. Thank you.
So.
Okay.
That's right.
Thank you.
any further questions or comments?
Just to follow up, but earlier in one of the presentations through the chair, we did not, let's go on record again, we did not have an appraisal of the building, correct?
No, we have not had a formal appraisal of the building. This is going to be a lease.
Councilman Gallagher?
Mike, on the lease here, if a door breaks, who fixes it?
If the door breaks in the interior of the building,
Here,
of this building,
yeah.
so this door out, the council
Any
door
door,
right here?
any door.
Any door. So it's similar to how this lease is written, is if the door gets excessive wear and tear on it, this door over here, as many of you may notice, it bangs every now and then. Ultimately, that responsibility is coming back to us.
Who makes the call?
I'm in communication with the landlord of the facility and
So you make the
making
call?
sure that the building is in good working order for the people of the county.
Well, I'll just be quick about this. I'm not for this, will not be for this. I think this is a tragic day in Cuyahoga County's history. If we were buying it, I think it's a different story. I don't know why we would go this way when we have a lease to buy on this building. I don't know why we wouldn't do a lease to buy on that building or buy it outright. I know why the owners don't want to do that, because they're looking to make an awful lot of money on us and their other tenant. So there's a lot of things, I think, that are just glaring in this, and especially with the market having bottomed out. And I saw the estimates, and I appreciate on building new. I'm just absolutely in disagreement with it, but, you know, we'll do what we're going to do. Don't get it. Thanks.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just as a follow-up to that, what is the answer to that concern simply the landlord, seller, or lessor has no inclination to put a buy clause at the end? Is that they're just adamantly no? Did we try?
No, we spent, so Councilwoman, sorry, for your benefit, we had discussed this in the past. We spent a significant amount of time working through what the options would be and negotiating what the options would be. We currently do have an option in the lease where the landlord, before they can sell it, has to offer it to the county. The county has the right to acquire it. If the landlord goes to market at a different, if the county declines and the landlord goes to market at a lower number, they have to bring it back to the county first. So the landlord cannot sell this to the market without offering it to the county. And the county has the opportunity to match the market. If the market has bottomed out, then the county has the opportunity to match that. So that option is in the document.
So my colleague's more concerned about baking in, go ahead. I want Councilman Geller to address this. The options there, what do you?
Well, why not now? Why isn't
Yeah,
it in there now?
Baking it in the lease, I think, is what he's saying.
The market's bottomed out now, and you know it.
And
in 30 years, we don't know where the market's going to be. My guess would be, and my hope would be, is that the market is extremely high, which makes it even worse of a deal for us. So, I mean, I just don't know why we went one way with this building and we're going this way with this building. And I'll tell you, and again, I know there's some intricacies here, so it's not apples to apples, but I just don't know why we're not protecting our interests here. If they bought the what was it, 14, 20 million, what'd they buy it for?
the 1801 Superior Building, as is, 12.5 million.
Okay, 20. We'll give you an 8 million, call it a day, have a nice day. They won't do it because they're staring at 90 million here, or 60 million.
So to be clear, and we did also discuss this previously, the pricing to buy the building as is, buys the building as is. And we did run those models out to be thorough, to make sure that we understood what that would be as compared to this lease where the landlord makes a corresponding investment in the lease. Remember, that number that is in the legislation is an all-in number to be transparent with the council and the people of Cuyahoga County as to operating expenses of just occupying the building over a long period of time, 17 years. That would be true in the Hughes building. That would be true in any building, really. The utilities don't profit the landlord, as an example, but we had it in there thinking it was better to just be transparent about a projected overall cost. So to be clear, landlord doesn't profit $91 million on this deal. It is lower than that. The purchase option would have been an as-is, but under the lease, the landlord is required to make a significant investment in the delivery. And we modeled out the options, and what we're proposing to you, we feel, is the most compelling for the county.
And again, I don't know why we're not protecting ourselves on the back end. You know, this almost reminds me of that thing the Browns are going through with Cleveland. You got to offer it to somebody for sale. Well, yeah, okay, you can have the Browns for $22 trillion. It's for sale. Who's got it? Nobody. I mean, we're here to protect the county and dollars, and I just don't see this. And I'll leave it at this. And I know how you're going to answer, but I want you to see if you can answer it honestly. Get in the other guy's shoes. Would you rather be us or them on this deal? You'd rather be them.
You want me to answer? Different groups who have different needs.
Any further, Councilwoman Conway?
Through the chair, will we know the investment the landlord makes in dollars and cents in preparing the building?
Yeah, we've already got a projection of what that is.
No, I mean,
And-
as they go through it, they might come up with some cost savings. Well, we know day to day, what the dollar amount that they spent toward their investment for this building.
At the end of the day, what's required here is a scope of delivery and certainty on the quality of that work. And if it costs more or it costs less, that's the landlord's issue to work out. They take on that risk and they get to share in that benefit.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, we're just talking about the lease that we're in with $1 to, we can purchase it at the end with a set amount, and I think that's what Councilman Gallagher is looking for. Was that ever even on the table?
What's the question? I'm
To
sorry.
have a buyout at the end of the lease baked in with an amount?
Yes, ma'am, we absolutely.
And I understand you've talked about this before, but I want
yeah,
to talk about it again.
Yes.
Okay.
That was one of the scenarios that we ran to ground. You have to remember that in this situation, and I still believe after all these years that this was the right decision to make back when you made it. But this situation was different than the situation at 1801 Superior. We have different circumstances. We ran to ground the option to acquire the building at the end for $1. We absolutely did. Even with the very favorable, in my view, option that you will have to match market on any future sale of that building, we believe that this is the most compelling financial alternative because the rent that you pay here is significantly higher than a $12 rent at 1801 Superior. And that is part of what we're thinking about here. To have that option for $1 at the end, this rent would be higher. And so you would be paying for it over time, effectively, to fully amortize that cost.
Okay. It's just a risk of the market.
Any further? Councilman Miller.
Am I correct that after the 17 years, we have 2 5-year options at our option?
Three options at 5 years.
So we have 32 years. And in those out years, how is the rent determined?
It's a fixed number. So you have the option you have 3 options essentially. You can choose not to exercise and stay in the building and relocate at that time. You have the option to exercise at a known set of economics, or you would have the option to look at that set of economics and approach the landlord at that time and say, we'd like to renegotiate. That's always an option on the table.
So even though 32 years is a long time, my hope would be that we would, that facilities would last longer than that. And my concern is a scenario where at the end of our time, that the landlord says, we're not willing to sell, we're not willing to rent, we have other plans for this building. In 30 days or whatever time they're required to give us, you have to be out of here. And we're left with no other choice than to find other facilities. What protection do we have, if any, against that kind of scenario?
I don't mean to sound silly when I say it, but you'll have 32 years of vision to get to that point, and I don't believe you would ever be in a position where it's a 30-day, right? You'll know the date that the lease is expiring, and if you're not staying beyond that date, you will have already made plans at that time. I think that that's likely.
Maybe the way I phrased the question wasn't quite on target. So forget for the moment about the 30 days. But what I'm concerned about is a scenario where we're at the end of the 32 years, we don't have any choice to stay in the building, and that we have to make other arrangements. Do we have any protection against that kind of scenario?
So you have 32 years of control here. You yourself had just mentioned that you have concerns about properties lasting. Again, you'll have the ability to see whether or not the building is working out for your needs. But at the end of 32 years, it will be a matter of negotiation at that point. There's only so much time that you will have control of the asset while it is owned by another group. And you can negotiate for more, but the 32 years is what we have negotiated for now. It's an exceptionally long time to have unilateral control of a real estate asset that you don't own.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just on that note, then I have another question. At some point in the lease, we can go to 32 years, and they can say everything's hunky-dory, everything's good. And when it's over, they're going to say, gotcha, you got to move out today. Is there anything to protect? You have to notify us a year before, a 2-year before, a 3-year before, or 30 days? Is there something in there? Just stimulated my thought process when Councilman Miller said that.
Again, I would tell you that if in 27 years, you haven't negotiated a further extension as part of that last one,
You start thinking about it.
then you have to make preparations.
Got it.
I would defer to the law department to know if there's any sort of notice period, but I couldn't see a world in which for this operation, for an organization like the county government, that you wouldn't have made those plans in a quarter of a century from now.
It's on us, and if there is a length of time, we don't know if it's in the contract or not, but we have our protection of, okay, it's getting close, we have to make a decision because we made the long-term lease. But I wouldn't mind, if there is a
Yes.
notice component of it, I wouldn't mind knowing what it is.
Yeah.
Somewhat irrelevant, though, the way you described it.
Not of that nature that you are describing. We would need to plan for that eventuality at the end of 32 years of renegotiating the lease. It doesn't provide notice. On the flip side, though, as Ryan mentioned, there are 3 5-year renewal terms, and we are obligated to notify the landlord of our intention to renew not later than 9 months prior to the expiration of the then current term. So we need to decide. It's not automatic. We need to decide and notify them at least 9 months prior to the end of any given term whether we're going to renew.
Thank you, Mr. Law Director. And through my president, notice would be cool if we could get it in the lease on our end, if it doesn't screw up this whole legislation. It came from Dale, and I'm just bringing it up. I think it would add some value. I don't think it screws up things. I don't think it's a big deal. So I'd like to consider that as we move forward with this.
So whoever's in my position 27 years from now, because it won't be me, 27 years from now, we are going to be giving the notice, hopefully, for the final 5-year renewal. That should be triggering a conversation now with the BOE. They may be doing everything virtually by then. Who knows? But we'll figure it out. I would say, and that final renewal is the time when the planning would be starting for 5 years from now. Where are they going to be located?
Absolutely, and through the chair, in 32 years from now, I don't think any of us are going to be here, but that's our job, to tighten up as much as possible. We think it can't be, maybe. It's kind of on the thing I'm going to bring up next. If we can just put in a notice, then we'll all know. And if it can't be done, that's fine. I'm just throwing it out there as something to be considered to my administration and to my colleagues. So we'll ponder that a little bit more. You have another question, Mr. President?
Yes, go right ahead.
And to the distinguished presenters, what I asked to the Board of Elections, Mike, we got that letter, and then it was discussions with the administration. Can you go over what you gave the confidence to the Board of Elections, you know, is it the parking garage? Is it the fourth floor? We're going to work on this. Can you just, so publicly we can hear what things that were discussed to meet our goal of having, to the best of our ability, the Board of Elections under one or one campus, one building or whatever.
I believe so we've had ongoing discussions about this, and when we did put this out as an RFP, we tried to achieve a lot of goals here, and I think two
No,
primary
I'm all
goals
good
we've
with that,
gotten
yeah,
to.
yeah.
So, right now, that fourth floor is under contract
Yeah.
with some, and with Step Forward, and they have a renewal period on top of it.
So if they leave, you're hopeful that the Board of Elections, the Board of Elections will go there?
I would think there's opportunity for discussion to figure that out. If that fourth floor does become available, I would say a few years from now, let's see where we're at, instead of trying to plan for something right now that may not be needed.
Yeah, but I can see
And
that,
it's,
but
and
I-
it's
yeah.
specifically, it's office space on that fourth floor.
Yeah, when you gave me the tour, it's nice.
Where we are at the Halley warehouse is really warehouse space.
Mm-hmm.
So, two different areas, but there is opportunity within the garage space at
That's what we talked about,
1801
yeah.
to be potentially converted for that type of use. We're going to continue this discussion. We're going to continue to look at the Halley warehouse and sprucing up those areas where BOE is located. I've got some estimates and some general scope of improvements that need to be done there. So that is on our radar, and that's one of those things this council is going to continue to ask questions about, and I'm well aware of it. So you'll see some improvements taking place in that area in the near future.
And thank you. And I'm just driving the point home. And Mike, this has been yeoman's work, and your team has done a great job, and I'm fully supportive of it. But there was the letter that was sent saying, we would like these things to be part of this. And then there was a discussion with the administration and the board and the Board of Elections. And they said, oh, we liked what we heard. We're cool with it. We're going to trust you. I just want the things that was discussed in that room, we'd like the garage to be this. We'd like the fourth floor to be this. I don't know all those specific details because I wasn't there, but I want to do as much as I can to get that understanding that was in the room as tightly ingrained in this legislation as possible. So in 4 years or 10 years, we'll know what the intention of the legislation was. So I just want to go through that exercise, and I did a Board of Elections, and then I kind of think I got my point across without beating the horse too bad. So thank you, Mr. President.
Councilman Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Dever, it's only 25 more years. I think you underestimate yourself. You're just a kid. To Ryan, I was asked by a constituent, what happens in 10 or 12 years if some building pops up that would be perfect? Is there a way out of this lease, or, I mean, is there an escape clause in it? Or is it locked into that 17 years?
The initial term is a firm term on the lease. I would tell you, though, Councilman, that for what it's worth, in our review of the market, we reviewed prior to the RFP being issued to make sure that we had done our homework and had a sense of things, issued the RFP, let the market come back to us, made sure that any property owners with something relevant came forward. This building achieves the outcomes that we had targeted with that RFP. So you say, you know, if something had come up that's perfect. And I know that there's the discussion about it all being on one campus at some point in the future, and we've made a point to negotiate for that flexibility to have that control over the fourth floor in the garage. I would tell you, if a building was to pop up, it would be 1801 Superior.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Councilwoman Conwell?
I just wanted to make a statement that I guess out of the previous conversation, this all goes to my colleague Gallagher's point of view that the landlord appears to have the upper hand through this lease. Now, when you get down to the 15 years, I know there's a lot of X factors. We don't know how the market's going to be. We don't know how that area is going to be built up or not built up. 5 years might not be enough time to start to negotiate or renegotiate a longer-term lease. So, question would be, how many years has the BOE been in existence where it is now?
I believe it was 1988, 87 is when
So
the
87, so that's 39 years? Yeah, almost.
Councilwoman Simon?
You can state again.
Thank you. I like the site because the Board of Elections is content with the vision, and I want to defer to the Board of Elections, but paying $50 million is of base rent and making repairs, thereafter does not sound like a good deal. And if this is the building that you think is it, if you had to pick, it would be this one, then we should lock in this space. I mean, things could be different in terms of early voting. We don't know how voting's going to look. Hopefully it's more by mail, but what if everything's built up downtown and there's no other space and we're stuck, having to fulfill a function and there's nowhere else to go, and then we're at the mercy of this landlord without building in a buyout? That's my concern. I mean, nobody can predict the future, but we need to address it instead of just say, we'll see, there's an option. I don't like that. I don't know what voting's going to look like. I don't know what downtown's going to look like, but I do know we're going to need a Board of Elections. So I think we need to go back and look at a buyout at the end of the lease.
I would say, Councilwoman Simon, again, we ran exhaustive modeling on the various options. I don't love to say this because this is our hometown, but Cleveland is not a real estate market that fluctuates aggressively one way or the other. It generally stays fairly steady. Things like inflation are different, but the real estate market itself doesn't move as quickly. So I think that having the timeline that we've built in here in order to be prepared for decisions and having unilateral control of an asset for up to 32 years, as well as when I look at the economics of the deal, and I hear what you're saying about the total amount of rent being a large number, but you have to remember that's over a period of up to 17 years for a space that is 200,000 square feet. And when you look at the landlord's investment in the building and the return that they're making on the investment, it's not out of line for the market.
Okay, thank you. I think the ARP requested proposals or bids for the Board of Elections to be under one roof and with a campus, and we didn't get that. So it's not ideal to begin with. We're punting. And so it's not actually what the Board of Elections even wanted to begin with. And so we're kind of compromising on having this hybrid facility, and now we're compromising on being left, flapping in the wind at the end of this lease period. And I don't know what the market's going to be. You're the expert. You don't think it fluctuates, but, I don't want to take that risk on the county taxpayers.
I will tell you, in addition to the exhaustive models that we ran on different structures and possibilities for structuring this deal, we also ran exhaustive models on different paradigms for occupancy for the Board of Elections at this site, including those that would have had the entire Board of Elections there. Ultimately, it was a mutual decision that that wasn't going to be suitable or enough space of the appropriate kinds of space, and that's why we are where we are today.
If I can, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think the reason why the space wasn't adequate is because we actually included in the eighth inning maybe, the HHS component to this. That wasn't the original plan when the BOE was seeking the space. And it was only thereafter, at the last minute, that all of a sudden we're adding on HHS, which took away space from the Board of Elections. So, I appreciate what you're saying, but you're leaving out a pretty big factor.
That came later. That actually was later. No, the HHS addition was after that evaluation. It was a solution to making the option economically compelling because of what we determined was the best occupancy strategy for BOE.
I'm not sure about that.
Further comments or questions? All right. Well, it certainly has been a robust conversation. We're at the point now where, as I take all of the factors into consideration, I am of the mind that of moving forward with the consideration of the vote, and I would entertain a motion from council to move this forward to second reading.
So moved.
Second.
It's properly moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Should we do a roll call?
Why not?
Is there?
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Byrne is absent. Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Schron is absent. Ms. Conwell,
Yes.
Ms. Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Simon,
No.
Council President Jones.
Yes.
The motion carries with 7 voting in the affirmative and 2 casting dissenting votes.
All right. Madam Clerk, we will move to the next item, if you would read it into the record.
Ordinance 2024-0004, repealing and replacing Chapter 703 of the County Code, establishing a Justice Center Capital Projects Fund within the general fund, and directing the deposit of specified sales and use tax proceeds therein.
At this time, I think we have a prepared statement from Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. President, and to my colleagues. Last year, the county executive introduced the legislation to extend the sales and use tax as part of a package to purchase the site in Garfield Heights and secure financing for the construction of the new jail campus. When we voted to extend the sales and use tax last December, I made a statement that I planned to introduce legislation to ensure that the revenue would be solely dedicated to the purpose of supporting the capital needs of our jail and justice system. This legislation is now before us today. Throughout the many hearings held last year, it became clear that costs of building a new jail, combined with additional needs for the courts and justice center, will far exceed the revenue collected by the newly extended tax, at least in the short term. In its presentation to council, the county's financial advisor estimated the annual revenue collected by the sales tax would be approximately $58.5 million beginning in 2027, $51 million of which would be required for annual debt service on the jail alone. Plans and cost estimates for the courthouse are not yet known, but it is not unreasonable to assume the annual costs for a new courthouse would be tens of millions of dollars annually. But even if the county were to postpone a decision on the future of the courthouse, we know that maintaining the current Justice Center will require significant capital investment for the foreseeable future. In my view, this ordinance should be an uncontroversial step for this council to take. First, it is fully in line with the purpose for which the administration has repeatedly indicated they plan to use the tax revenue. Second, as I previously noted, we know our short-term capital needs will far exceed the available resources generated by the tax. So this legislation guarantees a floor of available resources for our justice system without limiting our ability to budget appropriately. Finally, it is our financial circumstances change 10 or 20 years down the road and a future council determines it is in the best interest of the county to reallocate these funds, they can do so legislatively. But this decision should not be made deliberately, nor as an afterthought in a footnote of a budget book. For now, I believe the most prudent course of action is to ensure we fulfill one of our core responsibilities, that is, meeting the capital needs of the county justice system rather than extraneous, non-essential activities. I expect many of our constituents and some of my colleagues feel the same way, which is why I respectfully ask for your consideration and support of this ordinance. Thank you.
All right. Our staff is available for questions as well if there are any questions from council. And I would imagine administration as well. Eric is here to answer questions as well.
Can we talk? Are we waiting on?
Sure, no, go right ahead. Do you have a question?
No question. So, thank you, Councilman Kelly, for bringing this forth to us. I remember when I spoke to you about it, I kind of remarked, we already had something in place in terms of keeping the ARPA dollars going directly to be, the remaining of the ARPA dollars being directed toward the jail campus or whatever. That in turn, so I always try to do my homework. So I said, in theory, I would be supportive of it, but to let me do some homework. So I wanted to ask, have you met with Walter or spoke to Walter in terms of this legislation and what it could perceivably do? And I think Walter's here. May or may not be. But in speaking to Walter today, the funding of the jail is going to come from the 0.25% sales tax. So the way it was explained to me that 0.25% sales tax, if it's only going in for just the use of the jail or whatever the terminology that was put in the legislation, we also use that 0.25% sales tax for helping us offset sheriff's department costs and things of that nature. So from the administration standpoint, by doing that, it would limit them from being able to use that 0.25% sales tax for other departments when it's needed. So I asked what would be the compromise to that, knowing that many of us might feel that we want to make sure that those dollars are mainly directed toward the jail project. And so, I don't have the legislation in front of me, but I think it laid out renovating, invest, different words. And so if you were amendable to, and this would be the compromise, adding the word operating in the ordinance, that it would still allow that money to go in that, for that jail, but if we should need it for overage of sheriff's departments or anything like that, we could use it. So, that's my proposal.
Mr. President, if I may? Yes. I know the county executive and maybe others from his group have been contacting council members to try to see if there's some way to not go strictly with this particular plan.
And I just want to say that didn't happen to me.
Okay, but
Walter's my buddy. I reached out to
I mean,
him.
I have,
Okay.
I talked with Mr. Janis and with Mr. Doyle, but the executive has not reached out to me to ask me anything. And this is what I said I was going to do in December, and this is what I'm doing right now. So, if there's more discussion on this, then that's great, but this is what I'm bringing forward. Thank you.
Councilman Sweeney?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mike, you have something to say?
I asked Mike to come up if they're thinking about adding a word to it or whatever. Mike's the one that helped draft this up or did draft this up, and,
Perfect. So thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to talk. Mike, relax. No, I think you just stand there, because that's what he, if there's a question, it's up to you totally. You're commended for being a man of your word, which I appreciate. I'd like to hear from the administration to get their take on the legislation. And then, once I hear that, I got some questions. And then when my questions are over, I'll think I'll be in the proper space to be able to make an informed decision. So, Mike, you're off the hook for now, I think. Is it okay? He goes? I wouldn't mind hearing from the administration to understand.
Are there any further questions from our colleagues first before and I do have Eric Janis on the list, but this
Okay. I
is
thought
your
we were gonna
time.
Make a motion there, so.
Do you want us, excuse me, Mr. President, do you want us to make some comments before? Because I have a couple comments, and I think
How do
my
you feel?
colleague does.
Some of your colleagues have commented already. If you'd like to wait to allow Eric Janis to speak, we can do that unless you wanted to speak.
I kind of want to, if you don't mind, Mr. President, I'd rather hear kind of our thoughts of what we're thinking before we bring
This is your time. Councilwoman Turner, the floor is yours.
I
Vice
can wait.
President.
I'll
Okay.
wait.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Okay, so, yeah, I think I feel along the lines of what I heard Councilwoman Conwell expressing, Councilman Kelly. And yeah, absolutely, I had members of the administration reach out to me. And I'm glad they did. I have my own questions. What I think is that the legacy that we create will not be in the construction of a new building. That it will be what we put into the building. And I think the language that you was looking for is that it's limited to acquiring, constructing, renovating, furnishing, equipping, and improving a county correction center and a courthouse. And so I got to thinking about what if we chose another option for the courthouse, because we haven't really had any robust conversation about the plans for the courthouse. So what if we decided that we wanted to do a lease option, for example, with the courthouse? This would not provide funds for us to be able to do that. So that was one sort of thing that gave me pause, because we haven't even discussed what we're going to do with a courthouse yet. I think it was two weeks ago, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had the young lady come from Franklin County to talk about the different programs being executed in their facility. And I think that if we wanted to do something equally innovative and creative here in Cuyahoga County, that this legislation would not allow us to pay for a program like that either, because again, it's just limited to the acquiring, constructing, renovating, furnishing, and equipping. So I think everything about this legislation, Councilman Kelly, is amazing. I would be open to supporting it if we could amend it by adding that word, something that would allow us to do some operations. I know that the county, back in 2007, when the county commissioners were in place, this was passed to help pay for the medical mart and the convention center complex. And there was some monies left over that allowed you all to, through the general fund, pay for the county hotel, the animal shelter expansion, and the Veteran Services Commission, which is a new building. So I think that this should absolutely be centered for justice purposes. Like, we can only spend this money for justice purposes, but I would be open to adding a word or two to make it a little more robust. Those are my thoughts.
Vice President.
I supported my colleague, Mr. Kelly, in this endeavor because I have always been of the perspective that we need to be conservative with the uses of this sales tax. I did not want it to be open generally to do a wide range of things. And as I heard in the last month, people encouraging the public bodies to spend money on a sports facility when we have a priority need here for the jail and the justice center. I wanted the language in this legislation to create priorities for the use of this money so we get these things done first and do not get sidetracked. I am willing, I believe it is appropriate of us to discuss things with each other and to learn from each other. But I think we all want the jail and the Justice Center to be done first and to be done well and to be done with this money. And so when our colleague initiated this conversation, I was very supportive because, as you know, I'd never supported 40 years of a sales tax in the first place. And so if we're going to do this, which a majority of this body voted to do, then let's restrict what it's done so we get what is ultimately our major priority. And so let's discuss the other things, and if there's some language that should be considered for an amendment, and we should be open to discussion, but let us not forget what our priority for this money was. Thank you.
All right, any further comments from council?
Just for clarification.
Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
He is yielded to you, Sonny.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess it's just a question to Mike King about, there was a question raised by my colleague about could we lease? I don't think this language restricts leasing because that's acquiring, constructing. It's a version of we could lease under this language, correct?
Michael King, council staff. Yes, I believe that was included in the intent of how this was drafted. I know our law director has spoken to bond counsel to make sure that whatever we do here, makes sense from a bond perspective as well. He has some technical changes that are not going to be introduced today, but if this moves forward, that may be considered by the council. I don't think any of them change the underlying merit or substance of the legislation, but I think it would help clarify that question further.
Okay.
Mr. President, are we ready to move forward with this, or do we need more conversation?
Where I am right now is, as I'm listening to you, I think we need to take a little more time. But let's continue the conversation. Councilman Miller.
So, Mr. President and my colleagues, my general approach is that I believe in the budgeting process, and I don't like to see general funds have extra restrictions. But I'm also looking for consensus and looking for how we can find something that would be generally agreeable to the council. And I do have one question for the sponsor, and also I'm going to have some further questions when the administration comes forward. And so, Mr. President, my question to Councilman Kelly is in thinking about this legislation, how important was it as a consideration to make sure that the 0.25% sales tax not be used for sports facilities?
Which is one of the reasons that I introduced it the way I introduced it.
Okay, thank you.
Further comments, questions? If not at this time, go right ahead, Councilwoman.
My question was, is it possible to put language in there that would say exactly that we could not use it for any sports teams? Is it possible?
So here's my thought. After hearing the conversation, the way it's flowing, we're going to take a little time. So we'll have time to have that conversation where you'll be able to, we'll work with staff, and if there's any amendments, adjustments, any decisions, not decisions, but any thoughts you have around this, we have the time to do that, to have that conversation. So you don't have to solve it right here. If not, let's allow Eric Janice to present a statement from the administration.
Mr. President, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this issue. First, to Councilmember Kelly, I really appreciate the conversation we had. I understand the spirit in which you're offering this, and although we don't agree, I understand exactly where you're coming from, and I appreciate it. The administration's position is that we are opposed to this legislation really for two reasons. One's philosophical and the other is more practical in nature. As has been mentioned by at least one of the council members, what is proposed here is restricting what is previously unrestricted funds, which is the sales tax. That, in general, is not something that we think is a best practice. As you all know, we must come before you as an administration with our proposals on spending money, and you must sign off on them up or down every time we bring a proposal forward. We would prefer to have that conversation in the context of the entire budget, as Councilmember Miller said, or as we need to come to you to talk to you about it. But restricting a funding source as opposed to making decisions on expenditures is not what we think is a best practice philosophically. As a practical matter, too, we have a challenge with this. In addition to Councilmember Conwell's comments about dollars needed today for other general fund things, I've been provided by OBM information in the past about the various one-time funding items that have been expended out of this $0.25. And they include things like Lumen, Sherwin-Williams, the Veterans Services Building, and many others. So restricting those dollars would preclude the ability to make decisions on one-time items as needed, if needed. And so as a practical matter, should the $0.25 that currently exists, if it were eliminated, both in terms of what it was being spent on and what it raises, it would take us to a deficit this year of nearly $38 million, because there are some expenditures that have the budget out of balance. And then there are expenditures that we are using from that $0.25 to plug some general fund holes. And so as a practical matter, and we as an administration recognize this, we're going to need to have to figure out how we are going to be able to close that gap or work within our budget once we get to 2027, 2028, and these dollars must go towards what we need, which is the jail and presumably the courthouse. I would also mention that our folks have looked at this as well, so I will eagerly await the law director's review. We were concerned about the idea if we move forward on a courthouse proposal, that it be a lease in structure, and so we would want to make sure that that this legislation wouldn't preclude our ability to do that. But for all of those reasons, we are opposed to this. It has the issue of stadium funding has come up in some of my conversations with you individually. And all I can tell you is it is not our intent in any way, shape, or form to spend this $0.25 on any of our sports stadiums. We are looking at solutions for Gateway that involve non-sales tax revenue options. We're a ways away from figuring that out. And again, we'll have to bring that forward to you for consideration when the time is right. But even further than that, I've had conversations with Brown's leadership before as they contemplated trying to put together their proposals, asking them not to consider the use of our final $0.25 sales tax capacity for the solutions to their problems. That is all in the context of not wanting to use sales tax or general fund revenues to entertain for any of those conversations. So we're going to continue to work on other non-sales tax, non-general fund related sources, and we're going to see if we can find solutions for those. But all I can tell you is that we have no intention of doing that.
President.
Councilwoman Simon, then Councilman Gallagher.
Thank you, Chief of Staff. I appreciate the comments. I do want to say that the reverse can be true. Oh, I'm sorry. Who? I don't care. Ask President Jones.
Take a moment and finish, finish your comment first.
Okay, my comment. I'm glad you didn't ask me to go to the podium. would be that the opposite is true as well. If this were to pass, the administration can come back with proposed amendments to use the fund for other purposes. This isn't a charter amendment where we're locked in. If this did pass, your administration, the administration would be able to come back and say, hey, we need an amendment for X, Y, or Z, and council then can weigh in. So it could go either way, right?
I mean, that's fair, but
Okay.
the question would be how additionally challenging that might be depending on the nature of the conversation we're having in the time.
Exactly, and vice versa. So I guess it's just where we sit. I just want to go back, and I think colleague Stevens, Vice President, brought this up, is I had originally sponsored legislation at the time of the passage of the sales tax. I think it passed 6-5. And my concern at the time stands that we never went to the voters. The pitch was to us, this was for the jail and for the jail and the Justice Center, but the voters never weighed in, and council passed the 6-5 with an understanding, I believe, that this would be used as sales tax for this purpose, for 71 acres, for building of a jail, all these things. And now what I'm hearing is when council actually wants to codify this, that somehow now, well, wait, maybe the sales tax could be used for something else. And I just want to bring that to the table, that my concern at the time has come to pass much more quickly than I thought.
And I would only respond, Councilmember, if I may, that issue already existed previous to that conversation. These dollars were already being used for general fund issues dating back to 2019. And so all we are asking is to preserve flexibility in the event we need to continue to use them in the event that there are dollars left over, and there may well not be once we issue bonds for the jail and once we consider how we're going to move forward with the courthouse. So we would prefer to have those conversations individually, either before you as we bring legislation forward or through the budget process, than have them restricted off the top. And that's just where we are philosophically.
Thank you. And I get it. I mean, you're kind of saying that the same modus operandi should continue with regard to the sales tax because it's, quote, an extension. In my mind, this was a newly enacted sales tax because it was for a purpose and it was carved out and sold to us that way. But I understand the position is historically it was used for more of a general fund flex purpose.
Mr. Sweeney have a question?
He wants to put them up there.
Everybody else gets the podium. We have a back and forth. So I'm just, no disrespect, I'm just used to it. I can't see it.
I can. I'm
So
back
let's
and
do this.
forth. I can see. Mr.
Obviously, we built that pretty station for you to use it. So
I'm
I
happy to
feel
accommodate
compelled.
Councilmember Sweeney. I don't know that I'm much taller than Councilmember Simon, but I'm happy to stand at the podium. No, I'm not.
So, Eric, what I'm saying to you is, the executive and those that have always spoken from there, you have the right to sit where you like, where you're comfortable. If you want to come over here, you can. If you wanna use
I'm
the
fine
station,
accommodating this council however they would like. So I'm happy to stand at the dais as
Aside
needed.
from the height issues, Mr.
Yeah.
President, which I am never in the top tier of, I'm taller than Sonny, but shorter than Marty. Let's talk about what the real issue is here. What are we prepared? Do we need more dialogue about this? It is important. That is why I put my name beside Mr. Kelly's, because I think this is a substantive issue we need to discuss. My colleague, Mr. Gallagher, regularly reminds me to be conservative in my thought processes, not to spend our taxpayers' money any way anybody else wants us to, that we're individually responsible. You're a good kind of godfather voice, Mr. Gallagher, encouraging us to be careful with how we move forward. We have got a significant responsibility here. And I thank my colleague for introducing this to make us think about how important this is, as well as the leadership of the administration. Because we must be careful. Today, because interest rates are higher and terms are shorter, and our bond council and other issuers and syndicators of financial funds are making it tougher for us to do things. Our money doesn't go as far as it used to because of inflation. It is our job to think these things through and to decide whether we need restrictions or whether we need additional conversation. So when I had a conversation with the county exec, I told him I had a commitment to Mr. Kelly, but I am willing among friends, because I think we all love this county, to discuss what is in the best interest of the county. Is there some language that can protect us, protect our taxpayers, but give a little more room to the administration? That's why we have conversations, why we have sessions and work sessions, and it may be appropriate to do that now. Do we need guidance from our legal counsel on how we have conversations with each other, given the public records law in this state? Mr. Kelly, because I talked to you about this before, I didn't think you were opposed to additional conversation.
I'm not opposed. One of the things, listening to Mr. Janus, is having flexibility in the money. Once this starts 2027 and beyond, I don't think there's going to be very much money for 10, maybe 15 years. If we use this money to build the jail, to whatever you want to do with the courts, I don't know if suddenly a lease for the court is a way to try to short circuit part of this legislation. I don't know what the purpose of that was. First I heard of that. But I don't think worrying about extra money is going to be all that big a deal until we hit 10, 15 years minimum down the road with the building of what we need to do.
Council President, may I respond?
You can respond.
Mr. President, to the council member, I would say two things in response. Number one, just for your comfort, the conversation about the possibility of a lease has been ongoing and been part of the conversations in the courthouse since we've started. Again, we're a long ways away from figuring out exactly what to bring forward and how to do this, but a lease type structure has been contemplated. So that is not new, specific to this legislation at all, I can assure you. The second thing I would say is there is flexibility within bond issuances, and I am not the expert that our fiscal folks are or that our fiscal advisor is, to structure bond payments in such a way that might provide some flexibility or some, you know, there could be a structure in which we're paying more on the front end. It could be a structure where we're paying less on the front end. So, and maybe as a collective, we're making that decision because we know we need the revenue for these other important issues before this county. So I would argue that it's very possible that we may not have any additional money, but preserving that flexibility and making that decision when the time is right, in my judgment, is the right way to do it rather than restricting it ahead of time, the revenue. It's more about talking about the expenditures.
Councilman Gallagher. Unless, okay, Councilman Gallagher.
I almost feel like I have nothing to say because I wasn't one of the people that voted for the extension, because I think it's those individuals who I greatly respect, and you'll never hear me say a negative thing about anybody that voted for this, because we were losing millions of dollars monthly by not moving. So in a way, the 6 individuals were justified in what they did. I disagreed with it, and one of the reasons I disagreed with it is what we're doing right now. We're being disingenuous to the voters. We had 2 candidates running for executive. I gave them both the information on the jail and the Justice Center, specifically on the jail. I told both of them in very direct and salty language to stay away from this. One of them decided to go there, at which time I called our executive now and said, do not follow. You have no idea what you're talking about. This council has done the hard work. We're ready to move, and it's all ready to go. Don't screw it up. Gotta go to the voters. Gotta go to the voters. Got to go to the voters. Fast forward to election day, and all of a sudden, it doesn't have to go to the voters. I understand being a candidate, and I understand things that you say during a campaign. We had two gentlemen saying the same thing. One's going to win. Now, here we are. It was going to go to the voters. Then we flip-flop on that. Then we get to a point where we got the 0.25%. We had to hustle this through because one of our colleagues was leaving, and that was a yes vote. And there was concern that the new person coming in wasn't going to be a yes vote. We are being looked at by our constituency, and specifically mine. I'm in a district that regularly tells schools no. Even if I thought, like some of my colleagues did, that I have to vote for this to stop the bleeding of the money we're going to lose on something we have to do in the building of the jail, I contemplating supporting that. But the 6 were there and they went. And again, I absolutely respect what they did. It had to be done in some fashion. But if we're going to be consistent with what this money was purposed for, initially it was supposed, if this went to the, if we would not be having this discussion if we were going to the voters. Because what we're really doing right now is we're talking about backdooring the money to other things. But the good news is, if you just leave it alone, and from what my friends tell me that support, that do our books, is that the money that's going to be brought in is going to be used for the building of the Just Center and the jail, and the funds necessary to back up the money that we borrow. So there, as Mr. Kelly says, there's not going to be a lot. The good news on the jail is, and I know this because I sat there and I paid attention, there are services within the jail that are necessary that we're going to advance. There are savings in the old jail to the new jail. Those monies should be maintained within justice services. When I say justice services, I specifically mean the mental and medical things that we're going to be providing in the new facility. It hopefully will be a wash. Hopefully. If there's new money needed, at that point, let's be honest to the people and go to them. We regularly have this room packed with people, well-intended, sometimes misled, but well-intended, wanting us to do more for the less of us. That's our job. 15 years ago, I didn't know that. I didn't believe that until I saw what we did, and I became a believer because I had to, because it's my job. We've got to be honest. And again, removing politics in the past and all that, that is what it is. We are here today. If we're going to be honest with the voters, we have to tell them we're going to curb this money for the purpose that was publicly stated by those that voted for it, those that didn't vote for it, and those that backed it. And I got to tell you, to be calling my colleagues to get things put in or maybe kind of salt the field a little bit on this legislation, I've been before it before. I've been in politics 25 years. I know, it's the game. I get it. But the reality is we have to face our constituents and go tell them what the good news is and what the bad news is. I think we need to be honest with ourselves. I think the executive has to be honest with us. If funds are necessary for anything else outside of a justice center and a jail, that's when the discussion occurs. That's when, and you're going to find 11 people up here going to bat for you. If we got to go to the ballot for more money and it's justifiable, I'm going into my district for you. And I will get you those votes, as will 10 other of my colleagues do that. But we're being watched now, and we got to be very careful, because the headline will be, and the pundits will say, well, they backdoored you again. They said they were going to do a jail justice center, and now they want to do operations, they want to do this, they want to do that. Would they be wrong? Not what I'm hearing. I want to make those people not have to be able to say anything. So to be honest, and to be able to look at my taxpayers and say, we're using your money correctly, I think we guardrail this money. If programming is necessary and needed, I think dollars are going to be made available. And if indeed the 6 individuals that voted for this, because I think they control, they should have the say here. If they want to put in anything else, then that's fine with me. But be very careful. If it's for programming, make it specifically for jail and justice services, specifically. And I think that would be fair. I think that would be honest. And I would think that would be necessary for us to do, indeed, if we decide to go that route. Because there's not a person up here that doesn't want this jail to work, doesn't want our justice system in a newer building where they can provide the services, the valuable services that they do, and the hard work that they perform. And whether it's a lease or whether we buy it or whatever we're going to do, we can get around that. And if at that point there are extra dollars, and I never understood the concept in my 25 years, I've never had extra dollars. I've never understood spare change. I just don't know what that means. But if there is, then I think we're reasonable to do that. But to send a different message right now, to send a different message to the taxpayers before the implementation of the 0.25% that was extended for 40 years, they have this discussion is way premature. I think we need to send a signal to Cuyahoga County residents, specifically taxpayers, that we made a hard decision, but we're going to stick to our word. We're going to back the executive at his word, and we're going to perform the best we can with the money that we have that was specifically earmarked for a jail justice center. And again, if there's extra at the end, which I honestly don't know if there will, probably not, maybe a little, then that's when that discussion comes up. And I don't think at that time you'll have anybody arguing the opposite. So to my 6 colleagues, thank you again. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you did. I appreciate the fact that you went out on a limb. I wish I could have joined you, but I couldn't. And one of the reasons I couldn't was because things like this make it look like we weren't telling the truth at the beginning. And I know we were. I know we were. But sometimes perception's reality. And that's what we're fighting. We're fighting perception. Let's let the people see that we're doing the right thing and protecting their dollars, and living up to our word. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Gallagher. You take up all the time. Just
Dale
talking.
has a comment.
It's all right. Did you want to have a final comment?
I think Dale Miller did.
For the Councilman Miller? Go right ahead, Councilman.
So, Mr. President, since we're less than 10 minutes before the council time, I'm willing to defer my questions till the next meeting.
All right. Thank you, Councilman. Excellent discussion, conversation. So let's do our due diligence amongst ourselves and with our staff based on everything that's said, and we will look to see this again. I will hold it until, again, the next committee of the whole. All right. Is there any miscellaneous business? If not, if nothing else holds our attention, our meeting is adjourned. We will reconvene at 5 o'clock for our regular council meeting.